Hello, and welcome to our Absolute webinar, New Innovation in Endpoint Security and Resilience. I'm excited to introduce our product experts hosting this session today. Diane Rogers is the Vice President of Product Management at Absolute and has over 25 years of experience bringing new technologies to market. She has a proven track record of driving innovation and achieving results, having led the release of industry-leading software tools like Flash, Dreamweaver, Shockwave, and of course, 6sense. Diane's expertise spans strategic thinking, entrepreneurship, and small business management. Diane is recognized worldwide as a dynamic public speaker, but on the quiet, she's also a qualified legal eagle. Tim LaFan is a seasoned sales engineer with over 16 years of experience in IT and cybersecurity. Currently serving as a sales engineering manager at Absolute, Tim is passionate about helping organizations meet their cybersecurity and risk management goals. And with that, I will pass it over to Tim to run through the agenda today. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for that. So let's kick off with the agenda here. So first of all, we're going to be covering off a little bit around who Absolute is. Okay. So for anyone who hasn't really spent much time with Absolute, don't really know much about us, but this is the first time you're having a conversation or watching anything around us, we'll give you the quick 5-minute on that. Then we'll hand over to Diane, and Diane will be talking about the 2 new product additions coming. That's Resilience for Security and Resilience for Automation. Once we get through that, we'll talk about how you can sign up to a 90-day trial of that technology. And then I will take over the reins. We'll start talking about Rehydrate and how we'll give you an overview of what it is, how it works. We'll then move into a quick demo so you can see it firsthand. Once I wrap up that, we'll show you how to get access to resources, how you get access to the recording, and then we'll move into a Q&A after that. So welcome aboard and let's have some fun here. So Absolute has been around for 30 years, and internally we've always kind of coined ourselves as the best kept secret in the industry. 1, because we have good products, 2, because we have good people, and 3, because we have good management. And we're slowly breaking out of that kind of unknown market now, due to our kind of purchase by Crosspoint Capital or acquirement from Crosspoint Capital. We have over 700 employees worldwide. And we're embedded in over 600 million endpoints globally as well. Now, what does that mean? When an OEM like Dell, Lenovo, HP, and as you can see there's 28 OEMs there, they ship a device from their factory. They embed our technology in the BIOS or the UEFI of those devices. Now, if you light up that technology, we can now make sure we're persistent. So if anyone tries tampering with the agent, removing the agent, even really reinstalling Windows or the OS on the endpoint, we can self-heal from the endpoint, give you visibility and control over that endpoint, and make sure you have a persistent connection from the moment you procure it all the way to the moment you deprecate it moving forward. Now, once we have that persistent connection, what we do is we gather a lot of telemetry from the endpoints. We can gather hardware input, telemetry, software telemetry, even network telemetry. And we allow you to make strategic decisions based on that. So if we move to the next slide, what we'll do is we'll talk about the ecosystem as a whole, and we'll kind of jump in from there. So as you can see this slide here, this is kind of the Absolute ecosystem. And we really break this down into 4 core pillars. The first pillar is endpoint visibility and control. Now this here is our kind of heritage solution. This is kind of what Absolute's bread and butter was originally. So this was really having a persistent connection to your devices, allowing you to discover what is on those devices, how those devices are being used, and the makeup of those devices. Then we have this locate technology, which enables you to identify where your devices are globally and do that with a confidence scale of that is very high. The next area you have is guard. Guard is the ability to be able to lock down a device, run scripts on the device, and actually even be able to wipe the device if you need to take security actions on it. And then the last one is retire, where you can actually wipe the device NIST standards at the end of your life cycle. So really what we're talking here is the full end-to-end life cycle of an asset. From the moment you procure it to the moment you deprecate it, you have visibility, control, and then of course you can retire it securely, knowing you have confidence in that. The next pillar, and you can see at the bottom of here, we have some dark green spots here. This is what Diane's going to be talking about today, so I won't be covering that right now. The other 2 areas is comply and heal. Comply is really our ability to look at all of the telemetry we have, define what a compliant endpoint looks like, and then use that data to feed into other systems to be able to feed in and say, hey, should we be able to access resource, yes or no? And we use the data from Absolute to be able to do that. From a healing perspective, what we're looking at is Absolute can self-heal from the BIOS, making sure you have a persistent connection to your devices. Now what we're saying is, let's monitor your critical applications, be that CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, SCCM, Intune, whatever. We monitor the health of those, and we remediate those if we see they're broken, or we reinstall them if they're down. The next pillar from there is remote access, and this is our secure services edge technology. And this is our ability to give you safe connection to your corporate assets, your corporate data centers, but also safe connection to your internet, to the internet as well. So as users are accessing the internet, we can make sure the data is secured and you have confidence in that. The other side of things is we have our monitor area, so we can actually monitor what is actually going on those connections. Typically, when you're actually traversing an internet, like traversing the internet, it's kind of hard to see what's actually happening on a daily basis. We can actually give you real world telemetry around what's actually happening, where failures may be happening, and also give you information around where anomalies might be happening in your organization, especially from a security perspective as well. And then based on all that information, you can optimize your network to make sure you have the right things happening, that everyone is able to have the right experience in their environment. Then we move into the last pillar, which is cyber incident response and recovery. Now that is our rehydration portion, which we'll be covering today. So hopefully you can kind of get a broad overview of what the kind of ecosystem looks as a whole. And our aim is, of course, to have this all under one single console moving forward. So we've covered off the absolute side. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to hand over to Diane, and Dan's going to be covering off the two new product platforms that we've just released. So over to you, Dan.
Fabulous. Thanks, Tim. I like to jump into my demo fairly quickly, so I have just 3 little slides here. And the first thing I want to do is really define the problem, and that is that vulnerable, non-compliant devices, endpoints, and unhealthy security tools, they are leaving you exposed. They make your attack surface bigger and more easily breached than you need. 76% of ransomware attacks are attributed to a known vulnerability. That means it's something, a patch that you haven't deployed, a security misconfiguration, and most organizations are running at least 2 months behind in deploying patches. I've seen multiple customers come through that were over a year behind. So how do you solve that problem? Well, you set up reliable patching, and this is the automated deployment of patches. So it just happens without you having to worry about it. It's on an automated schedule. The content updates automatically and is delivered successfully. The second part of that is security misconfiguration. So it's continually monitoring for anything that an update and IT settings on your desktops, your laptops, and your servers. Very important that you be proactive to reduce this attack surface. So you want to find a weakness before a hacker does. Make your attack surface so small that they're going to move on to an easier target. Now, those attack surfaces could be anything like a desktop, a laptop, a firewall that isn't set, a weak password, disabled BitLocker, older operating systems, a virtual machine that you aren't managing correctly. All of these can be entry points into your organization. We want to be able to lock those down because the hackers are exploiting the unpatched vulnerabilities, so known security flaws in softwares, any outdated software, poor IT management practices. And this can be a poor IT management practice could be from the IT management team or even from the more likely from the end user who's resetting things or has control over a device that they shouldn't have. Misconfigured security settings. So with that, let me jump in to a demo and show you how to reduce your attack surface today with our 90-day trial. That sounded very marketing-y, but it is true. There is a demo that's available for you to jump into the product today. And it's available from the new menus in Absolute, and that is the workflows and the security menus. And that will drop you right into the new Absolute console that has all of the patching and security capabilities. The first thing you're going to be able to see is this dashboard that gives you an overall picture of your risk exposure and over time, your current success. So I can see all of my devices that are safe, unsafe, or unscanned. What are they unscanned for? Well, they are unscanned for patches. And you can see that Absolute Automation looks for patch scans, the devices that need to be patch scanned. Right now, I have 67 devices in my test environment that need a patch scan. It has already detected that 131 devices require patching. Of those, 80 are critical. I can also see over the last 30 days, I've deployed 340 patches, and over the last 60 days, I've deployed over 2,000 patches. Now, we do those OS misconfigurations. Those are released from Apple, Linux, third parties like Adobe and Google. We don't just find it, we're going to fix it. It's also twofold. We do the OS vulnerabilities, but we also do your security risk. Now, think of the security risks as those misconfigurations like open ports, disabled firewalls, user account policies that have been misconfigured. First thing you want to do is do a security scan, and then you're going to do a security deployment to actually remediate those problems in the product. Now, what you need to do, or what you will see, are all of the devices that you can act on first. So I'm going to jump in and show you the devices view. Now, Absolute Automation is completely device agnostic. It supports Windows, Mac, Linux, desktops, laptops, servers, virtual machines, VM hosts. Those devices can be in the cloud, they can be public or hybrid, they can be on-prem, they can be roaming, they can be users working from home. And each of those devices, as you move here, you'll see your data grid, and you can see whether the device is online, whether it's a Linux device, whether it's a Mac device, whether it's a Windows device. Up here at the top, these are all action buttons. So I can instantly create a task that's going to patch my critical devices, patch all my vulnerabilities, or patch my unscanned patches. So let's go ahead and click on unscanned patches. To see what might need patching, you can roll over here and see a device health on any one of these devices. So I can see that this particular device has 4 critical patches that need to be scanned and 43 high. Well, let's go ahead and get that scan out of the way so I can actually find out what that device is vulnerable for. Well, when I click on that button, it sets up a task that will go ahead and let me do the work. And I can tell it when, where it's patching, and what its payload is. So here I have specific devices. These are all of those devices that it noted had not been scanned. And the vulnerabilities, I'm going to scan for all vulnerabilities. Well, to tell it when, let's just click at the start menu here, and I can tell it when to start. I can do a specific time. I can start it immediately right now. One of the strongest features you can do is to set up a maintenance window. And a maintenance window is both a start time and a stop time. You'll see a lot of maintenance windows in the industry that do a start time. But what we want to do is protect the productivity of your end users and make sure that that maintenance window stops on time as well. So if I wanted to create a new maintenance window, I'm going to go in here and call this my, let's call it Patch Tuesday. And I can tell it what hour to start, what time zone. Now, notice you have the ability to start in the local time zone. That means if you have a global organization and you want this patching to start at 7 a.m. in Spain, in Germany, in the US, in Asia, then you just click that button and it will always start in the local time zone. My option here is, well, I want it to start after Patch Tuesday to make sure my Patch Tuesday patches are going out every single month in a timely manner. And maybe I want to do that immediately after Patch Tuesday on the first Wednesday, let's say. Now I can save that maintenance window. And now I'll choose anyone. There we go. And now you can see it's going to start during a maintenance window. It's going to repeat. And we have a lot of other blackout hours, protected hours, configurations that you can make. But I'd like to move to that summary screen, and I can see that it runs in my maintenance window. It repeats every Wednesday after Patch Tuesday. And this is going to look at these devices, and it's going to look at all vulnerabilities. So as I finish that up, or I can cancel it, that is going to run. I've now set up a recurring policy to keep my my devices secure. Well, if I wanted to drill down on any one of these devices, I can choose a Windows device that is online. I can see that here. I can see what's sort of vulnerable in that device. And as I click down into that device, you'll see at this top level the information about this particular device, the make, the model, the manufacturer, the RAM on it. Also, how many patches are needed, how many unscanned patches on this device, security vulnerabilities, the security breakdown of those vulnerabilities. I can also jump in and do any sort of actions on the device I need, like checking WMI, running PowerShells, opening up a console, looking at the logs, the registry. As you was all sorts of powerful tools to work within that device. Well, you've got a sense for what the devices are. That's where you're going to be doing the remediation. But what are the actual vulnerabilities that you can be working on? Well, here we're going to look at the vulnerabilities. First of all, patches. And the patches here, it lists all of the content that's available. If I were to drop down here and take a look at my default queries, you can see that there's a very quick way to look at the different content here. This is a global list of my patch content, but maybe I want to look at only third-party updates. And you can see, we have a huge number of Acrobat, Adobe products, Citrix. Just you can scroll down and see all sorts of third-party patches that you can choose from. You can choose all CVSS rated misconfigurations, but here maybe I want to take a look at only my Patch Tuesday content. And you can see this little half dash up here is kind of constantly updating as those queries recalculate in real time. Now that is something that's really important to know about Absolute Automation. We have a real-time connection to all of those devices. So as a vulnerability opens up, we're going to know about it. We're going to update the information. You're going to be able to act on it immediately. What if there's a 0-day vulnerability? It'll pop up on your dashboard and say, this is being exploited in the wild today. Well, go ahead, click on that, and it'll distribute. So let's take a quick look at our content, and I'm going to grab one. Let's just grab, I don't know, a Windows, here's a Windows 10 version 1809. Well, it's going to bring up the summary information about this patch. And the first thing you'll notice here is a description on this screen, and this package supersedes. And you can see, I don't know, maybe that's 30 or 40 different patches that it supersedes. The patch content comes from the vendor, in this case, from Microsoft. The patch detection logic comes from Absolute. Now, the Absolute team has over 30 years of experience deploying patches. They have deployed millions upon millions of patches. And what supersedence means is that we're going to do all of the filters, the detection logic, determining what OS is specifically vulnerable for a particular patch. If a patch has been released and has a superseding patch, that means there's an older version and a newer version. Why would you waste your time deploying older versions? You get a lot of false positives in other products that show you're vulnerable for a patch, when in fact, if you just deploy the superseding patch, you'll be covered for all of those. You're also very bandwidth optimized with Absolute Automation. On this particular patch, the same thing. I can always see, what devices need this patch, who's not checked, who needs it, breakdown, and then instantly scan all the devices or patch all the devices. I can see the severity, whether it's been weaponized or not, if a reboot's required. All of these things you're going to want to be able to control when that reboot happens. And that's the kind of granularity and control the product's going to give you. Well, the second and third types of content that we'll look at here, of course, we're doing all of the hot fixes and the cumulative updates for the OS patches, but we also have full feature updates, meaning you can download, well, you wouldn't want to download Windows 10 anymore, but I can see exactly the distribution of all my Windows 10 devices. I have 25 1809 in my test lab, and here I have my Windows 11 versions. So you can go and choose which release of Windows 11 you want to deploy down to all of your devices. And again, very secure and bandwidth optimized so that if you're working in a large organization, you can work within those subnets and make sure that those files are being shared and securely delivered. The next type of content we're we have released is security content. And as I move down here, you can see all of the different security families, and they cover things like .NET vulnerabilities, antivirus. Maybe I want to look at my CIS benchmarks for Windows 11. So maybe you need to get compatibility and meet all of the CIS benchmarks. Well, I can click down and look at each and every one of these vulnerabilities, and it will give me details. I can also do the firewalls, the legacy software, the miscellaneous, the peer-to-peer, the post-patching. Obviously, there are, I think there are 100 different security families with thousands of security remediations and detection logic in there. So if I just pick the first one here, let's take a look at what that is. It's a similar dashboard, so you can see, what's going on. Here I can click on the View Details option, and that's going to take me into the website that shows me all the information on this particular benchmark for CIS. It gives me a description. It gives me an impact. So what's going on with this? Well, if somebody has symbolic links, they could, maliciously expose your system and make data available, corrupt it, destroy it, or a DOS attack. Well, here's the solution. This is the manual solution. So if you need to remediate these devices, you'll have to go down to each and every device somehow and, step through each of these different steps. What absolute automation is about is making sure that you do not have to do that. And we've created for most of these security vulnerabilities that you can detect a resolution workflow. Well, what is a resolution workflow? Resolution workflow is a predefined workflow that automates all of those steps for you. But in this product, we've given you the power to create your own workflows. So rather than taking you through an existing workflow, let me walk you through how to create your own. Now, obviously, the product comes with a number of example workflows for things like, how do you deploy critical patches? How do you do third-party applications? How do you scan all OSs? So all of those workflow steps are pre-built for you. Here, I'm going to start out with a blank workflow. Now, the workflow editor is a series of logic, approvals, and actions. So logics, things like, can I find a file? Is there enough free disk space? Is the firewall disabled? Is a particular process running? Is a user logged in? Once you find out the action or the response to any of that, you can go ahead and remediate it. So I'm going to drag out my first option, and that is low disk space. So let's find out if the C drive where I'm going to install these patches has enough space on it. Well, if it does, great, go ahead and patch. If it doesn't, let's do a remediation action. And that particular remediation action would be the ability to clean up the disk space. So let's take a look and scroll down. You can see the different actions. You can also run batch scripts, PowerShell scripts, inventory scans. You can run patching. You can set a reboot. You can deploy software, all of those things. Well, the one that I would like is the ability to up here under the OS usage, I can go ahead and do a disk cleanup. So is low disk space? Yes. Then do a disk cleanup for me. That means get rid of the recycle bin and whatever else I'd like to clean out that I think will make enough space. Then I am ready to create my patch, scan, and deploy. And again, I'll just drag that out. And once the disk is cleaned up, I can choose which patch query. So remember, we had a series of patch queries. We can do a Microsoft Patch Tuesday. There we go. That's going to tell me my exact payload. And now every month, this workstation, this workflow is going to go ahead and double check for if there's disk space low, they're going to clean it up. They're going to make room for the patch scan. And the last thing I can drop down if I wanted to is a reboot. I can do that reboot now. I can do a reboot with a custom UI, or I can do a quick reboot. Custom UIs, of course, you can make the pop-up look like it comes from your organization with your logo, as many security organizations are teaching people not to click on things that don't have your proprietary information. Well, let's exit that workflow, and I'll just show you how you would publish one of these. So let's grab the patch deploy with all prompts, and that's one of your default workflows that ships with the product. In this case, it's doing that same disk cleanup. It's doing a pre-deployment prompt, all patches. Then it's going to go ahead once somebody has accepted on their workstation that, not going to say it again, then it will go ahead and say, yes, I've accepted that. It goes ahead and it patches those devices. It checks to see if it needs a reboot, and it goes ahead and reboots that device with the custom prompt. Well, I love my workflow. I'm ready to set it up so that it is running across the organization whenever I want. To do that, I simply choose a recurrence, and that can be daily, on an interval, on a maintenance window, which we'll do in just a moment, on a network change. Once would be useful. Maybe you're trying to set devices into a desired state. Maybe it comes up right after a rehydrate, so that you want to make sure that everything's installed the way you want. I will choose, or you can do it on a user login. There's a maintenance window here. Now I'm just going to choose my difficult to find maintenance window here and here. Let's just say it's that one. Sure, love it. And now the final thing I need to do is choose my payload. Which devices is that policy going to run on? And you'll see a very similar user interface where you can choose a combination of individual devices. You can choose a query. You can choose a group. All sorts of ways to organize and deploy your patches. So I'm just going to choose I can do devices that need critical patches. Whatever you'd like to make in terms of your payload. So what are the vulnerabilities you're sending out? When is the time you're going to do it? And what are the devices you're going to act on? And there, now I have a recurring policy that's set up in my system to secure and reduce the attack surface for all of your devices. The last thing you might have to do is to prove to everyone that you did, in fact, do all this. This can be the CEO. This could be compliance agencies like HIPAA, SOX, PCI. Maybe you're trying to get your CIS benchmarking and you need to prove that. An auditor comes in. Well, here I'm going to choose perhaps for HIPAA. And then again, I just go ahead and submit that report. It's going to generate for a moment and bring up that full report of your organization. And you can see the overall patch compliance here is 70%. You can see how many patches have been installed, how many have been detected. So you can clearly see the 70% there, and the total number of managed devices, as well as the distribution of the criticality by both severity and CVSS. Oh, I am going to cover one last little slide about how you go ahead and get this product.
Thank you so much. Let me get the slide up.
Okay, when I'll tell you about it while he's bringing that up. It's a free trial of the Resilience for Automation. It's a 90-day free trial, up to 100 devices. It's very quick and easy to install. It will automatically come from your Resilience for Automation, or your Resilience product, your Secure Endpoint, and you just contact your account executive to go ahead and set that in motion. Over to you.
Amazing. Thank you, Diane. And I think the core thing from us from the sales engineering team is with this new patch management automation and vulnerability management tool, the lovely thing about it is it can be as simple as you want it to be, or it can be as detailed as you want it to be. And when we've been having these early conversations with customers, they share their current pain points with their existing solutions. And then we say, yeah, absolutely, we can solve those because of all of the kind of the no code blocks that you saw Dan walk through give you the power to go and answer and solve all of those core problems that you have there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take over the reins, and we're going to start talking about rehydrate. Okay, so let's get in the weeds here and jump in from there. Now, in around of July of last year, the majority of us woke up to the world and realized that half the world was down. Okay, and the reason that why half the world was down was due to a well-known cybersecurity vendor releasing a patch that caused devices to blue screen, and now, of course, we no longer had usage of our device. But the outcome of that was majority of devices, so like half the device across the world was taken down because of the tool was so widespread. Now, because we have all of our management controls, our security controls running above the OS, see that CrowdStrike, be that Tanium, be that Absolute, whatever, all of those controls were down. So the remediation efforts was pretty manual, right? We were asking users to go to their local device, enter a BitLocker recovery key, hit the F12 button or whatever the key is nowadays, go into safe mode, delete a file and go through that. And of course, that's a very manual process. And in some regards, they were sending IT teams all around the world to go and fix these issues. You think about it, if you work in an airport and you have a computer on the ceiling somewhere, you have to get a big long ladder and go and change that. It took a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of money. So about 2 years ago, Absolute envisaged something like this was going to happen. To the scale, no, but something like this was going to happen. So we'd started building the Rehydrate technology. Now, what is Rehydrate? Now, Rehydrate is a piece of technology that sits below the OS and above the UEFI, okay? And that allows you to boot into a recovery environment that is outside of your current operating system, so your Windows environment, okay? And once you can boot into that recovery environment, you can actually run a bunch of playbooks. Now, the first one we have here, as you can see on the top right-hand side, is our ability to run or install a gold image on the endpoint. Now, what do I mean by that, right? Like, say the device was completely dead, user calls you up tomorrow and says the device is dead. You can say, hey, I'm going to deploy a gold image to you. If the device is online, kind of checking in, but it's just not behaving well, it will receive the command and it will actually action it, reboot into the recovery environment and action that payload or that playbook. But if the device is down and it maybe is blue screening, whatever, and you can't get into Windows environment, the user will be able to hit the F6 key on the keyboard. It will boot into the recovery environment and then download and run that playbook from there. So that's kind of the first one, being able to deploy a gold image on the endpoints. And that could be, from a Microsoft side, that could be an ISO with an unattended file if you really want to just do a fresh install of the OS, or it could be a contained WIM file in there as well. The next things underneath this is we have the ability to add, delete malicious files. So if you think about the event that happened in July, we needed to enter a BitLocker recovery key, delete the file. Now, using this technology, you would be able to do that in an automated fashion. The only thing that user would have needed to do is hit the F6 key to initiate the playbook. And then, of course, you would have actioned all of that automatically for you. So the recovery process would have been minutes rather than days, weeks, and things like that. On top of that, we have the ability to add, delete, modify registry keys, and then, of course, run scripts from there as well. Okay. Now, the core use cases that we've kind of built this technology for, so let's quickly walk through those. The first one, and this is really why the technology was built. So when I say we didn't really expect the breadth of the down, because we were expecting it to be a ransomware event. Okay, so what we typically see in a ransomware event or an event that's happened from a threat actor is the threat actor comes in, they do their reconnaissance, right? They kind of find out all of the different tools, controls you run in your environment. They identify those, and then they run a weaponized payload to take them out. So what they're going to do is they're going to disable your Active Directory access, your Intune access, your SCCM access. They're going to disable all of your third-party controls in there as well. And as well, they're going to remove admin rights from that machine. Okay, and then once they've done that, they're going to deploy the actual weapon, the full weaponized payload, which is the ransomware tool, right? Be that WannaCry, whatever. They're going to deploy that on the endpoint and make sure that the recovery is thwarted, and you've got this information on your desktop with all the files encrypted that says, hey, give me some money for some what am I trying to say? Bitcoin, that's what I'm looking for. That's the word. So what you end up doing here is running a you're running an investigation. You identify what actually happened on the endpoint, but then you need to go through the recovery process. And typically the recovery process, because they've taken out all your different controls and things, the recovery process is super hard, super difficult. It's normally people running around machines, plugging in USB sticks, starting with the recovery process and going through that. And again, that takes weeks, months, and typically go down that process. And we see it on a regular basis with large organizations. So that's the first area that we spent time. The next one is forensics investigations, right? So as I mentioned, if you get hit by a threat actor, they deliver a piece of malicious code on your environment. What you want to do first, you want to investigate, one, how they got into your environment, how did they build persistence in your environment, and how did they then laterally move and deploy their payloads, things like that. tools, techniques, and procedures, in short. So what you want to be able to do is gather the artifacts for your investigation to identify how did they get in, how did they build persistence. So using the tool build, go below the OS, capture all the files that you need to capture, store them in a central location for your analysts to work through, identify where the threat came in, and kind of roll from there. The next one up from there is OS corruption recovery. So think of this as the event that happened with the well-known cybersecurity vendor. This one, OS was down, broken, whatever it would be, and you wanted to be able to recover from that. But that could just be a general user issue, right? That could be one person calls you up on a daily basis and says, "Hey, my device is down. Can you help me?" And instead of having to do crazy troubleshooting with them, you just fix their device remotely. The next one, of course, is secure remediation. Same kind of thing, being able to like add files, delete files, all that kind of stuff. And then the last one is a fail-safe mechanism. We kind of see this as the last resort, or like your last line of defense in your strategy. If everything's down and you have something that works below the OS and can communicate over the internet, you have a way of recovery. And that's kind of where we've kind of been building the technology. So that's kind of where we've kind of been working through from a technology perspective. Now, how does it work? I'll be showing this in a demo in a brief second, but this will give you a kind of high-level overview. You'd log into the Absolute console. You make sure your devices are registered and they support the rehydrate technology. You would click on the right-hand side and you would select your playbook, configure the playbook. Now, if the device is online and actively checking in, so if it has the Absolute agent installed, it's healthy, it's communicating back and forth to the console, it will then receive the payload, restart the device automatically into the recovery payload and run whatever payload you need. So you might find that there's a file you need to replace, and for whatever reason, it's locked by Windows, you need to do it below the OS, things like that. I'm sorry, I keep seeing my camera really losing its focus there, so we try that. The other option, of course, is if the OS is down, user hits the F6 key, loads into the recovery environment and downloads the payload and kind of runs it from there. And once that's happened, you can track whether it's been deployed, and you can actually track whether it's actually been successful all from within the console here as well. So let me stop sharing here. I'm just going to reshare into my console, and we'll just quickly jump in here and show you what this would look like. So if I share that, hopefully this is coming through. Diane, can you confirm you're seeing that screen coming through? Yeah. Okay. Perfect. So I'm going to be looking over here, sadly, rather than looking at the screen, just because I'm on a different screen. So as you can see here, this is the Absolute console. And if I come out of here, nothing really looks any different. But what I'm going to do here is I'm going to search for a particular device, as you can see here. And this is a device that's down. You can see it's not connected in the month. I'm not able to communicate to it. So what I'm going to be able to do here is I'm going to click into Run Playbook. And from here, you can see the 4 different playbooks that we've already mentioned from here. File operation, let me jump into that. Because we've been talking about this well-known cybersecurity event. Let's kind of talk through what that would have looked like from your perspective. He would have entered the BitLocker recovery key in here to provide that to us to say, hey, once you go down to the Windows disk, you have the actual key to unlock the disk. And then from here, you go into add actions and you can do delete file. You provide the actual path to the file, and now you submit that. And one thing you'll see here is user initiated playbook. This here is to say that when the user if they hit the F6 key, this would be initiated. If you don't hit that, it's not going to initiate anything. So you would check that box. Now, user hits the F6 key, it reboots, then deletes the file and reboots back into the environment. And actually have a mock-up of what that looks like very shortly, so we can kind of walk through that. The other areas in here as well, as I'm not going to go through the registry key, I'm not really going to go through the script. The scripting really is it's bash scripting. We run it within a kind of Windows PE environment currently. We will be moving away from that as we progress through our roadmap. But this would allow you to do more advanced things that you want to try and achieve. But restore gold image, this here you would host the file in Azure, AWS, or even in a secure FTP site. You provide us the URL, you provide us the usernames and passwords, whatever it might be. Tell her if it's user initiated and kind of go from there. And as I mentioned, you can provide us an ISO file with an unattended file in there. You just store that in the cloud repository, or you can provide us the WIM file with a guidance file in there as well. Okay, so that's kind of how that technology runs. Now, once you've kind of run through this, if you look at history here, you can see that I've requested the playbook. Okay, so you can see it's requested, and then once it's actually succeeded, it will tell you succeeded, completed, all that kind of stuff. So you can have confirmation that actually run in the appropriate manner. Okay, so that's really what it would look like from the console side. Let me quickly stop sharing my screen again and jump back over into my slides. And what you'll see here is Let me just jump into the next slide. Here is, of course, the slide itself. We're going to do a demo. But this here is a mock-up of what I'm going to show you next of what this process would look like. So we're going to talk about that well-known event, okay? So this is a device. You can see the users trying to log into the device. And as the user's trying to log into the device, it blue screens on them, okay? We all kind of seen this issue before. We've all tried resolving this issue. And normally it's a very manual approach. So we've asked the user to hit the F6 key during the reboot cycle, enter in a password to enter the recovery environment. And then from here, it's actually downloading and executing the playbook. Now, this is going to be super quick. So keep your eyes. This is it deleting the files. Okay, so going through deleting the files. Now it's rebooting the machine, and this is now Windows doing its thing, right? Windows is saying, yeah, I just need to check the disk, make sure everything's okay. And now, boom, we're back into the OS environment from there. So very quick, very easy. You've seen that we can actually help you recover en masse. From a roadmap perspective on this, we are moving the network down into the firmware, so the password requirement will be going away over time, things like that. And also, you've probably seen in here that it's a one-off action. We are working on being able to store the BitLocker recovery key en masse if you allow us to do that, of course, and then being able to replay that BitLocker recovery key. So you can say, hey, here's 100 devices, just go and run that payload or run that playbook. But right now, because we're in what we call our MVP phase, it's a one device per action kind of thing. And another option is this is purely for Windows. This isn't on Mac or any other platform right now. Awesome. So I'm going to wrap up here. So of course I've covered off the rehydrate portion. I just want to cover off where the different technologies sit based on our licensing and our product. So as I've just covered off the rehydrate portion, for anyone who has the resilience license, which is an existing tier license, you're lucky enough to have where it's already going to be included in your package. Right now we're in MVP phase. We're being very selective of who actually has it. So we're just making sure we get some good feedback. But as it turns into a GA product, you'll see this drop into your license tier, and you can roll from there. And of course, if you upgrade from control to resilience, you'd get that once it's been dropped to the mainline product line. The two other product lines we have is absolute resilience for security. This is the ability, of course, to go and patch devices, do third-party application patching, and then do that compliance reporting, which Dan showed you at the end. The last one here is doing the vulnerability remediation. So we can look to kind of the device configurations and things like that, being able to monitor, change, control those and actually solve them in an automatic fashion. And then being able to do continuous monitoring of that and intelligent workflows around that as well. And the nice thing about the workflows, right, we showed it in a vulnerability management perspective, we showed it in a patching perspective, but you can use this for whatever you want, really. I like to kind of coin it as like a saw for endpoints. You can kind of really build out all the different things you need it to do and go from there ad hoc. Oh, Adobe said we need to make this change on the registry across our organization. Let's just go do that. Or we need to go and check, do things on a regular basis or gather data, whatever we need to do from there. So it's a really powerful tool. So and these are the kind of two new tiers, and of course, rehydrators in the resilience tier as well. So I'm going to hand over now to Kristen, and Kristen's going to be talking about resources. Then we'll jump into a quick Q&A.
Yes, thank you both for that amazing session today. We have a few new resources that dive into what we've covered today. You can find those in the webinar chat now. I dropped all the links for you all to take a look. And we're going to jump into the Q&A now. All right, we've had a few questions come in through the chat. So the first one is for Diane. Diane, is there a way to roll back installed patches?
Yes, there is. And you drop it down just as I showed you in the creating a patch workflow, or in that automated sort of task where it just created the wizard for you. You can just choose rollback. So it's as easy as that. Patch deploy, patch uninstall.
Awesome. And Tim, this one's for you.
Yep.
Is this leveraging vPro technology?
No, it's actually our own code. So a lot of organizations have invested time, effort, money, or not actually money on buying devices with the vPro technology in it. Typically, this has been not widely adopted. The technology is pretty hard to set up, and we just have not even touched that. This is our own technology based on our existing persistence technology, and we've gone from there.
Diane, one more for you. What about user notifications? Any options to warn when a reboot is needed?
Absolutely. So the product's going to, first of all, it stores it in inventory if the device needs a reboot. It also stores it in the patch if the patch requires a reboot. So I can go ahead and if it requires a reboot, then I can notify the end user. I can tell them that the reboot's coming. And as I mentioned, you can customize that reboot screen. So there are all sorts of ways to control how that device reboots for the user to preserve their productivity.
One more for you. Can you
Yeah.
brand the reports to show our company's logo?
Yes, of course. Same as you can with the reboot dialog, you can replace the Absolute logo at the top and have your own logo on those reports.
And the last question is for Tim. I assume the rehydrate is only relevant to PCs. Is that correct?
Exactly that, yeah. Our BIOS persistence technology is really being shipped by the OEMs that ship Windows-based devices, and we're utilizing that for that, so we don't support Macs or Chromebook devices, things like that for this particular technology. But great question.
Awesome. That's all the questions we have today. Thank you both for a great session, and we hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you so much, all.